Welcome everyone to our student loan repayment workshop tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come learn a little bit more about your student loans. My name is Sabrina Calazans. I'm the managing director here at the Student Debt Crisis Center. We are a nonprofit organization with about 2 million supporters nationwide, and we are advocating for an end to the student debt crisis. We have a lot of folks joining us tonight, so please be patient with us as we try and answer as many questions as possible. Today, I'm joined by my team at SDCC, Sean Tonra, Shayna Hayes, Sabrina Ashley Sarah Saras, Spencer Dixon, and we're also joined by Lindsay Clark from Savvy. We have a lot to cover tonight, so we ask that folks pay close attention to the chat where we're going to be dropping links that you can access. And we ask that folks who have questions to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the toolbar where you can ask your questions and our team will try our best to answer. We are going to be receiving hundreds, if not thousands of questions tonight. And so I ask folks to please be patient as we try and go through all of them. We're going to just give it a few more minutes before we kick things off. But again, appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Welcome everyone who's joining on right now. We're just going to give it a few more seconds before we kick things off here. All right, well, I know we have a lot to cover today. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Sabrina Ashley. Sabrina?
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks again for everyone for joining us tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started. There we go. Thanks, Shayna. So as Sabrina mentioned, we're going to be unpacking the latest student loan changes and what they mean for restarting payments. A quick overview of today's program. We will be explaining loan types, repayment plans, consolidation, which is very important, new updates, and then also talk a little bit about debt relief. At the end, we will have some time for questions, and I will be pulling those. So if I mark your question as answer live, I will be asking that. And then just a reminder that we are not financial counselors or attorneys. We are advocates and experts here to help. So let's get into student loan types and servicers. So as you can see, there are a ton of different student loan types, but we've broken them down for you in this chart. So we've got federal loans and then private loans. And on today's workshop, we will not be discussing private loans. You can see that federal loans are split up into 3 categories. So we've got direct loans, Perkins loans, and FFELP loans. Under direct, we've got direct subsidized, unsubsidized, graduate plus, parent plus, and then direct consolidation loans. And these loans are all newer loans that are given out. We've got Perkins loans in the middle, and those loans are typically held by your institution, and they're no longer given out. And then we've got FFELP loans, or Federal Family Education Loan Program loans. And you can see that there are a few types there as well: subsidized Stafford, unsubsidized Stafford, FFELP Plus, and then FFELP consolidation. And FFELP loans are, as I said, no longer given out, but they can be commercially held or held by the Department of Education. And a note here that you can see under direct loans and under FFELP loans, we've got subsidized and unsubsidized. And really the difference there is whether you are accruing interest when you're in your in-school deferment. So with a student loan comes a student loan servicer, and servicers are in charge of managing your loans and keeping track of your payments. So we've split up between federal and private student loan servicers here, so you can kind of determine which one, what type of loan you may have if you're unsure. So we've got AidVantage, AES, CRI, Ed Financial, Heartland, Mohila, Nelnet, and OSLA for federal student loans. And then we've got private student loan servicers, which are typically banks or private institutions. So Discover, Navient, Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, and SoFi. And these servicers change a lot. So when you borrow a student loan, you might start with one servicer, and then a few years later, you might have a different student loan servicer. For example, Navient used to manage federal and private. Now they're only private. And then also with Navient, they're exiting. So all of those student loans are going to be transferred elsewhere. So how to use studentaid.gov. So this is where you will go to find out what kind of loan you have and who your servicer is. If you have any questions about your federal loans or the programs that are available to you, this is also where you will head. This is just a small snapshot of what it might look like on your screen. And you can see there that we've given you the URL, so www.studentaid.gov, and it is very important to make sure that you type it in. Do not Google it. Unfortunately, there are people and companies out there who are trying to scam you, and those options might pop up if you Google it. So please make sure to type it in. So once you get to studentaid.gov, you will be taken to this login page. And if you already have an account, great. You can just type in your email, phone, or FSA ID username and then your password. If you don't have an account, just click create an account. It will ask you for some personal information, but this is important to link your personal student loan information to you. Once you get through the login process, you will be taken to what's called your dashboard, which you can see here. And there are a lot of different things that you can do here. You can look at your upcoming payments, your servicer, your due date. Every once in a while, it will give you a link to your servicer page. And then you can also look at this big My Aid box that's kind of towards the bottom, and we've got that view details button highlighted there. So once you click on that view details, you will be taken to a screen, and these are just small snapshots of what is on that screen, but it breaks down your loans for you. So you can see that this person has 11 loans. This is the total amount in the balance that they have. And then it also breaks down your principal versus your interest, which is nice for you to see. It will also break it down differently for you to see what types of loans you have. So Perkins loans, subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, whatever types of loans you have, it will break it down for you. And that is a quick overview of how to use studentaid.gov, what loan types there are, and then also student loan servicers. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Sabrina, who will go over student loan repayment options.
Thanks, Sabrina Ashley. That was a lot of really helpful information as we dive into the repayment options that are available today. So looking at the repayment plans, the standard plan is where most folks start off with. When you graduate from college or you finish your program, you are automatically placed into the standard plan. Oftentimes, the standard plan is not the best option for folks in terms of being able to afford it. So there is something called an income-driven repayment plan. And this is a plan that we will discuss shortly based on family size and your income. Within those IDR plans, which is the larger umbrella, there are multiple categories. So there's the save plan, there's pay, there's income-based repayment, and there's income contingent repayment, which is the only available option to Parent Plus loans. In addition to that, there are also these alternative plans that are older, but we're not going to get into today. All right, as I mentioned, there's the standard plan. The standard plan is a 10-year repayment plan with fixed monthly payments. This does not change, it remains the same throughout the 10 years. But as was mentioned, there are more affordable options for borrowers who are struggling. These are oftentimes out of people's range to be able to pay. And so with that, folks often turn to income contingent or income driven repayment plans, excuse me. All right, before we get into the IDR plans, we're going to talk about the on-ramp repayment program. One thing that we've been hearing from folks since payments resumed in October of 2023 is that they can't make their payment for some reason, or they're concerned about affording their payment. And so there's something called the on-ramp, which is essentially an automatic 12-month grace period for borrowers who miss payments. So you do not have to apply to benefit from this. If you do not make a payment, that counts as part of the on-ramp over these 12 months. The pros to this is that you will not fall into delinquency or default status if you do miss your payments. And you should not be reported to collection agencies or credit bureaus if you miss a payment. There are cons because interest will continue to accrue if you miss your monthly payment. And if you're not enrolled in an IDR, your future monthly bills will be automatically adjusted to reflect the accrued interest during that time. And if you are working towards IDR forgiveness or public service loan forgiveness credits, you will not receive credits for the months that you did not make a payment. All right, so let's look at the student loan repayment plans where action is required, which are those income-driven repayment plans. All right, so looking from left to right, you look at the most generous plan to the least generous plan. The SAVE plan, which we're going to dive into very shortly, used to be REPAY. So if you were enrolled in REPAY, you were automatically placed into the SAVE plan. There's also the Pay As You Earn, known as PAY. That is going to be phased out in 2025. So if you're currently enrolled in PAY, you'll be allowed to remain in there. You just won't be able to enter PAY after it's phased out. Then there's income-based repayment, and then there's income contingent repayment. As I mentioned earlier, ICR is the only repayment plan available to Parent Plus loans if you consolidate them. There is something called a double consolidation process that folks can go through that's very lengthy and very complex to try and get into other plans such as SAVE. But traditionally, the only plan available is ICR for Parent Plus. So here are some of the benefits of enrolling in an IDR plan. So the monthly payments can be more affordable. The payments are calculated as a percentage of your discretionary income based on your income and family size and not the loan amount. This can often help folks with lower incomes, those who may have lost a job or who have decreased incomes. It helps to prevent folks from falling into delinquency and default, and it locks in a lower monthly payment for a year. Now, the downside to this is that the standard plan is a 10-year repayment term. For IDR plans, it is extended to 20 to 25 years. 20 years if you have undergraduate loans, and then 25 years if you have graduate loans. So that is the one downside of that. Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about the SAVE plan. The SAVE plan, as has been touted by the Biden administration, is one of the most affordable plans for folks. But again, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So when we look at the qualifying loans for the SAVE plan, they are direct undergraduate and graduate loans, as well as direct consolidation loans. Loans that do not qualify are FFELP loans or Perkins loans, and you can consolidate that in order to have those become eligible. And then Parent Plus loans do not qualify. However, they can be, there is this process, as I mentioned, the double consolidation loophole that could potentially allow your loans to be enrolled in SAVE. Part of the SAVE plan offers something called automatic recertification, which allows you to either opt in or opt out of this. And what you can opt into is the Department of Education and the IRS to connect and essentially provide that the IRS would provide your income information to the Department of Education, where you would not need to recertify your income every 12 months. It would be automatically done for you and calculating your payments. That is helpful for a lot of folks who might not want to miss the deadline. You might want to opt out if your salary changes often throughout the year, or if you work in one part of the year but might not work in another part. If you're not working, you want to lock in a $0 payment. And so that is just one way to approach opting in or opting out. Now, let's look at what's effective right now for the SAVE plan. There are two phases when it comes to the SAVE plan. There's what's effective now and what's going to happen in the summer. So right now, single borrowers who make roughly $15 an hour or less than $30,000 a year, will have a monthly payment of $0. Any unpaid monthly interest will be waived as long as you meet your minimum monthly payment. So if it's $0, it's still going to be waived. And this is going back to October 2023. And then there's also this portion of the SAVE plan where if you have a low balance, so folks who have been in repayment for at least 10 years and have balances less than $12,000, you will have your debt canceled. And this applies to the total loan balance, not the individual loan amounts. And this is on a sliding scale, so it's not like if you have 12,500 or 13,000 that you're completely excluded from this. It does add an additional year of repayment for every additional $1,000 over 12,000. And then beginning in the summer, if you have only undergraduate loans, you will see your monthly payment be cut in half because it will be looking from 10% of your discretionary income to only 5%. And then if you have a mixture of undergrad and graduate loans, you'll see a weighted average of between 5 and 10% of your income based on the original principal balance of your loans. All right, so looking at SAVE in action, we're looking at Shannon here. So in the fall of 2023, she applied to SAVE. Her annual income is $38,000. She has 0 dependents. Her repayment began in 2019. Her loan balance is $25,000 and her monthly interest amount is $104. And her payment under SAVE is $43. As long as she meets that $43 payment, that monthly interest is going to be covered. Now, looking ahead to what is going to kick in the summer, where Shannon has the same income, the same number of dependents, began in 2019, her balance is the same. Her monthly interest remains the same. However, her payment under SAVE has decreased. So that is what folks can look forward to in July of this year. All right. With that, I'm going to toss it to Sabrina Ashley. I see that there are questions coming in, and so we're going to take a couple of questions now, and then we will have a more extensive Q&A portion towards the end. So Sabrina Ashley, I'll kick it over to you.
Awesome. And I only see a couple of SAVE questions, so this will be brief. But one question that I've seen a couple of times is, can anything happen to the SAVE plan? I know this is an election year, so I think people are concerned if there's another administration that comes in, can they do anything to the plan? And maybe Spencer, that would be a good question for you.
Sure. Um, it's uh it's hard to say with 100% certainty. And we are Biden administration has been helpful for student loan borrowers. The action that the administration took in establishing the SAVE program built off of decades of precedent and authority. It is very different than the authority that the administration initially claimed when it attempted to broadly cancel student debt at the $10,000 and $20,000 level that the Supreme Court struck down. So I hate to bring out my crystal ball because it's not always correct, but I would feel pretty confident in saying the likelihood of being able to successfully challenge and strike down the SAVE program is much harder to do compared to challenging other actions that the administration has taken.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. Um, Sabrina, I'll toss this one to you. Um, some folks are wondering if they're not in the SAVE plan yet, can they apply and still make it for the summer benefits?
Absolutely. You can apply for the SAVE plan whenever it is that you'd like. I know that Sean has been sharing links in the chat, and Sean, if you can drop it there again. Yes, you can apply whenever you'd like. You can apply now if you want to get into it right now. It takes maybe a few weeks to process your application, is what we've been hearing from folks, but you can absolutely benefit from the SAVE plan starting now and seeing those effects kick in later in the summer.
Great. And then a follow-up to that, a lot of folks are wondering, how do they apply for it? Do they need to call their servicers? Is it something they can do online?
Yeah, so there are, you can do it three ways actually. You can go online to studentaid.gov/save. That's one of the options. You can do it by calling your servicer and asking them to enroll you in the SAVE plan, or you can do the paper form and do an IDR request that way. The online application is probably the best way to go about it, but if you'd like a little bit more help, it might be worth trying to call your servicer and having them help you that way.
Awesome. And then just one last question, and I'll toss this one to Spencer. What happens to the interest under the SAVE plan?
So as long as you are making the monthly payment that's required under the SAVE plan, whether that's $0 or $50, the interest gets wiped out on a monthly basis. So if, for example, you normally would have had an accrued interest of $100 every month, that interest is being wiped away each month. But to clarify, if you have an existing amount of accrued interest previously, the SAVE plan is not going to affect that one way or the other. But it's basically making the SAVE plan ensures that any new accrued interest does not build up month to month.
Great, thank you. And I see a couple more questions coming in about the SAVE plan, and it's a common question, so I'll just go ahead and address it. The SAVE plan is a type of income-driven repayment plan. And at the end, we can go back to that as well if there are still some questions about that. So since it is an income-driven repayment plan, you can apply for the SAVE plan and for public service loan forgiveness, since they are different. And with that, I'll go ahead and toss it to Spencer to take us through the next section.
Thank you, Sabrina. So I will be talking about student loan consolidation and the income-driven repayment account adjustment. So what is consolidation? Despite the name, consolidation is more about converting older loans into newer loans, newer direct loans, and in doing so, unlocking your eligibility for the most generous monthly payment plans and forgiveness options. Certainly for a lot of borrowers, it will still involve combining multiple loans together, but for the purposes of the being able to take advantage of these plans, it's really about converting them to the newer type of loans. So when you consolidate your loans, there's a lot of advantages to it. One, you get one monthly bill, then rather than having a bunch of different ones, sometimes over multiple servicers. You'll get a fixed interest rate for borrowers with older types of loans that still have variable interest rates. This could definitely be a benefit, especially with rising interest rates. As I mentioned a second ago, the really big benefits are access to the most affordable IDR plans, including the SAVE plan, which is a type of IDR, and access to public service loan forgiveness and forgiveness through the IDR plans. If you have older loan types like the FFEL loans, you're not going to be able to access all of the most affordable IDR plans, and you're not going to typically be able to get forgiveness through those or through the public service loan forgiveness program. So by consolidating your loans and converting them to a new direct consolidation loan, you're going to unlock your eligibility for those programs. Next, just some disadvantages to keep in mind, or at least to be mindful of on the next slide. Yep. You will have a potentially longer repayment period on paper. So if you were maybe on the standard plan and you're planning around a 10-year repayment on paper at least, or at least sort of in theory, and you consolidate your loans and you're sort of starting fresh. The standard plan on consolidation is often longer than 10 years, but that's still sort of the theoretical number of repayment years. If you're someone who, by consolidating, you would be unlocking forgiveness in 3 years, what the official repayment period on paper is doesn't really matter, because you're really benefiting from the consolidation by unlocking that eligibility for forgiveness. The second one here is unavoidable, but again, can still be worth it for a lot of borrowers. Consolidating is a capitalizing event, so any unpaid accrued interest at the time of consolidation will be added to the new loan that gets created through the consolidation process, a process that's called capitalization. Your interest is getting added to your principal and creating a new principal at that higher amount. And then you're going to hear this several times throughout my part of the presentation and others as well. April 30th, about a month from now, is a really, really important deadline. If you are considering consolidation, we strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to apply by April 30th of this year. Your application does not have to be processed by that date, but it should be, you should have submitted your application by the end of that day. After this April deadline, stricter rules are going to go back into place on how older loans are treated, and will mean that you at least could partially lose your repayment history credit on your older loans. So one of the big benefits of consolidating or applying to consolidate before April 30th is that the number of months in repayment on your oldest loan gets applied to all of the loans that are being consolidated. So this can be really helpful for those who maybe took a break between undergrad and grad school and have loans across both times. By consolidating, you're going to apply your repayment history from your undergrad to all of those loans, including your grad ones. It also can be helpful for Parent Plus loan borrowers who may still have their own debt. But after that April 30th deadline, some stricter rules go back into place. Next is showing sort of what consolidation can look like in different cases. So if you have direct loans and grad plus loans, you'll get one direct consolidation loan. If you have different types, like the older FFELP loans, the Perkins or HEAL loans, which are less common, but some folks have, or Parent Plus loans. Those will go together. One thing to note is if you have unsubsidized and subsidized loans, those cannot be consolidated together into one loan, but you will get two separate loans. It's not that you can't consolidate, you'll just end up with two separate ones if you have those two different types. And then in terms of what this looks like on studentaid.gov, we really recommend doing it online. There is a paper form, but for a lot of borrowers, it can be harder to do, and it's more prone to mistakes. There is an online application for consolidation. There are many steps through the consolidation application, but I think typically for folks, it's going to take between 15 and 30 minutes. And it's certainly time well spent if you are going to be able to seek the benefits of a lower monthly payment and a quicker path to forgiveness. So on the screen, you'll go to prepare and apply, and you'll see consolidate. And this is under the loan repayment tab on studentaid.gov. Next, just going to touch upon the one-time IDR account adjustment. So what this is, you may have sort of seen examples of this in the news. The Biden administration, announces every couple months that, X number of billions of dollars have been forgiven. For the most part, it's this program that they are rolling out over time. So what this is because of historic servicer mismanagement, which for many borrowers is well underway and still exists. The Biden administration is looking back at each individual student loan borrower's account and retroactively counting nearly every month, with some limited exceptions, when a borrower was in repayment or should have been in some form of repayment had it not been for servicer mismanagement. This flexibility is really good news because it allows those who had their loans for longer speed up the pathway to forgiveness. This is especially beneficial for borrowers roughly 42 or older, which we get that number. This is, not going to apply to everyone, but sort of your typical borrower who went to 4 years of undergrad, 20 years after graduation from undergrad at 22 gets you to 42. Those are the folks that are really going to benefit from this immediately because they're going to be the ones that are going to be most likely to get forgiveness immediately because of this program. Borrowers with newer loans are still going to benefit. You're still going to kind of jump the line and speed up your pathway to forgiveness, but you may not see that forgiveness immediately. I'm not going to read through the list here, but these are on the screen are the different types of repayment or periods that should have been in repayment that the Biden administration is going back and retroactively counting through this process. So next, just kind of breaking down what this looks like. So who will benefit? First, borrowers who have reached 240 or 300 months worth of payments for IDR forgiveness. That's where I was citing borrowers who, by and large are 42 and older, or borrowers on the public service loan forgiveness track who have 120 months of payments. And we started to see that cancellation happen in the spring of last year. Second, there's a group of borrowers who must take action in order to benefit. Borrowers who have commercially held FFEL loans, Perkins or HEAL loans should apply for consolidation by April 30th of this year to get the full benefits of the one-time account adjustment. Even though the name might be a little confusing because they're doing this account adjustment on a rolling basis, it is really only going to happen in one. They're only going to go through each person's account one time, and that's where that part of the name comes from. And so the April 30th deadline is really important because if you don't apply to consolidate it before that deadline, when the government goes through and reviews your account, you're not going to get that full repayment credit history applied. And then third, all other borrowers will begin to see their accounts updated with any additional qualifying months of payment towards IDR and PSLF forgiveness later this year. Every student loan borrower, we are told by later in the year of this year, is going to see an actual number of qualifying payment count on their studentaid.gov website or on their account. And this is something that those who have MOHELA, who are on the PSLF track, are familiar with. You know that you have your sort of official PSLF credit count on MOHELA. All borrowers are going to see that towards the end of the year on studentaid.gov after the account adjustment is run. Last slide for me is just an example here of the IDR account adjustment in action. So Diane had commercially held FFEL loans, but consolidated before April 30th of this year. Throughout her repayment period, Diane was misinformed by her student loan servicer about her options and was put in deferment and forbearance several times. Because of the one-time account adjustment, Diane will have had her loans forgiven by this summer because she will have been in some form of repayment on her undergraduate loans since 2004 or 20 years. And so if you look at Diane here, her job type is one in which she is not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So her repayment, her forgiveness horizon is at a minimum going to be 20 years. She started repayment in 2004, which is 20 years ago. And only because she took the action of consolidating her loans and converting those older commercially held FFEL loans into a new direct consolidation loan, she was eligible for the one-time account adjustment. And even though she wasn't technically in a formal repayment status during that whole time, because of the flexibility of the account adjustment, those 20 years are going to count towards her required payments, and her balance will have been forgiven by the summer of this year. So, there could be a lot of Dianes out there on the webinar tonight, but it really requires you to take that action and consolidate, or excuse me, apply to consolidate by the end of April. So with that, I am going to pass it to my colleague, Lindsay.
Great. Thank you so much, Spencer. I know that was a lot of valuable information, but that account adjustment, I think, is going to make a really big impact in a lot of people's progression towards forgiveness. So really exciting updates there. I'm here to talk to you about public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. And this can be one of the most powerful ways to have your loans forgiven. So we're going to sort of do a deep dive now on all you need to know about the program. So PSLF began in October of 2007, and it is essentially full forgiveness on the remainder of your loan balance, whatever that may be. It could be $5,000, it could be $500,000. It doesn't matter. Tax-free, so there are no federal tax implications here, after you have made 120 qualifying payments. Now, what exactly constitutes a qualifying payment, we're going to talk about in just a second here. But I want to clear up a few common misconceptions about these 120 qualifying payments. First of all, they don't have to be made consecutively. You just need to reach 120 total cumulative qualifying payments before you can have the remainder of your balance forgiven tax-free. However, you can only receive one qualifying payment credit per one calendar month per one payment, meaning you can't double up on payments in a month and get double the amount of credits, or you can't make a big lump sum payment and get more credits than you normally would. In any given calendar year of 12 months, the maximum amount of PSLF qualifying credits that you can receive is 12. So if you have to ultimately reach 120 total and you can only get 12 a year, you are all very bright people on today's webinar, that's going to be 10 years minimum before you can receive forgiveness under this program. So many people talk about PSLF as a 10-year program, but that implies that borrower is making those payments consecutively, which again, you don't need to. So I encourage you to think about it more so in terms of these 120 qualifying payments that you need to reach before you can achieve forgiveness. Now, there's a couple of things and criteria that are important to check in order to see if you qualify for this program. And again, we're going to go into more detail, but I'm just going to outline these for you now. The first is your loan type. Do you have a direct loan? You will need to have a direct federal loan in order to qualify for the program. And if you don't have a direct loan, let's say you have a FFEL loan, you will need to consolidate that loan into a direct consolidation loan in order to qualify. So first is your loan type. The next is, does your employer qualify? And we're going to go into more detail on the coming screens as to what types of employers qualify as public service loan forgiveness eligible employers. And then the last step is, are you in a qualifying repayment plan? And again, we're going to go into more detail on that in just a second. So those are sort of the three things: your loan type, having a direct loan, your employment, and your repayment plan. All right. And then once you've satisfied all three of those and said, okay, I can check all those boxes, you can apply for public service loan forgiveness by submitting what's called the PSLF Employment Certification Form. Some people call it the PSLF application, some people call it the PSLF form, but it's the one and only form for the program. And that needs to get submitted. And you can do that as early on in the process as you'd like. So you can do it after your first year of qualifying employment. You can wait until you've done 10 years and then submit those forms, which I discourage you from doing that. It's in your best interest to do it early and as often. I recommend about every 12 months as possible. That way you're basically getting each of those years worth of credits certified, inching your way closer and closer to that 120. So we can go on to the next screen here. And again, I'm going to go into more detail on exactly what qualifies on the employer side and repayment side, et cetera. But one thing that I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of is that, if you work or you plan to work for a public service loan forgiveness qualifying or eligible employer for at least 10 years while you're in repayment, really the strategy to get the most out of this and maximize your benefits is to pay as little each month as possible, right? You don't want to pay any more than you absolutely need to, because ultimately you're setting yourself up to have the remainder of that balance forgiven, okay? And so what that means is when you're repaying that loan, you're going to want to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, because that's going to help to minimize your monthly payment and ultimately maximize your forgiveness. So it's okay if, while enrolled on an income-driven repayment plan, let's say you qualify for as low as a $0 monthly payment, right? So you're not making any dent in bringing down your student debt balance. That's okay, because again, each one of those months that you're enrolled in that plan is going to count as a qualifying PSLF credit, and you're trying to achieve 120 total, at which point you'll have that loan balance forgiven. So you're not worried about trying to get that loan balance down, because again, you're going to have that forgiven. All right, so going on to the next screen here, let's outline what exactly does qualify for public service loan forgiveness as far as those three main categories: your loan type, your employment, and your repayment plan. So as far as loan type, again, direct loans, that's the big one here. So that could be direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, direct grad plus loans, and direct consolidation loans. And that includes ones that have been created with a parent plus loan. If you have a parent plus loan, you can qualify for public service loan forgiveness. However, you will need to consolidate it into a direct consolidation loan in order to qualify. So again, if you've got that word direct in front of that loan, you are in the clear as far as qualifying for public service loan forgiveness. Now let's move on to employer. So as far as qualifying employment, any level of government, federal, state, local, or tribal qualifies, as well as any 501c3 nonprofit. There are a few other critical public service areas that we're not going to go into too much detail on tonight's presentation, but while they might not be nonprofit 501c3s, they can qualify. But really you're looking at, again, all levels of government and 501c3 nonprofits. Now, because this program began October of 2007, it is retroactive when it comes to employment and repayment, et cetera. So any qualifying employment that you had starting October 2007 to present day is fair game. Unfortunately, any qualifying employment before October 2007 does not count or qualify, right? Now, you actually can combine multiple part-time employments if you happen to work for a couple different or multiple qualifying employers. All right, so long as combined you are working 30 hours or more a week, and all of the employers that you have are qualifying employers. So you don't just need to be full-time at one employer to qualify. You can combine multiple part-time employment. And then last but not least, repayment plan. So any repayment or payments made between October 1 of 2007 and April 30th of 2024, okay, qualify, all right, on any plan, all right, so long as you had a direct loan or you consolidated your loan and you were working for a qualifying employer, okay? And when we say action may be required, that means potential consolidation, okay? And starting on May 1st of 2024, the qualifying payments will include those made on a standard plan or an income-driven repayment plan. All right, and again, we talked earlier in the presentation about the different types of income-driven repayment plans out there. So it doesn't matter which one you're on, you can be on any one of the four, you just need to be on one of those income-driven repayment plans. Okay, now let's talk about what does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So as far as loan types, those FFEL loans, FFEL, which stands for Federal Family Education Loans, Perkins loans, loans in default, and private loans. I will say with, unfortunately, private loans, there is no corrective action that you can take to make them eligible. Once they are private in perpetuity, and they will never be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Now, these Perkins loans and loans in default, you'll see those asterisks. That's because if they are consolidated, and again, there's an asterisk next to the FFEL loan as well, if they are consolidated, they can become eligible for this program. So unlike private loans, they are not ineligible, in perpetuity, right? They can be consolidated and become eligible, but that's again, an action that you would need to take. And if your loans were in default, if you bring them back into good standing, which I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes here, they can become eligible for that program once again. Okay. As far as employment, unfortunately, government contractors are not eligible. Labor unions are not eligible. 501c4 nonprofits and political groups are not eligible. And any religious instruction is not eligible. Okay. And then last but not least, as far as repayment plan, all right, starting May 1st of this year, 2024, okay, any alternative plans, so like a standard extended or graduated plan, or any periods of deferment, forbearance, and default are not going to be eligible either. So again, you're going to need to be either in the standard plan or one of the income-driven repayment plans to qualify. All right. Now, Spencer had just talked to you guys about this one-time account adjustment. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail here on how this applies to anyone who is pursuing public service loan forgiveness. So under these account adjustments, if you have 12 or more months of consecutive forbearance or 36 or more months of cumulative forbearance, you will receive public service loan forgiveness credit for those periods of time. Now, these changes are going to be applied automatically to all PSLF eligible direct loans, including consolidated and and unconsolidated Parent Plus loans. But as Spencer just talked about, borrowers with commercially or federally held FFEL loans will need to consolidate those loans into direct consolidation loans before the account adjustment is applied in order to get PSLF credit. And again, that deadline to consolidate and maximize your payment credits is April 30th of this year. So again, April 30th, that is the big deadline to consolidate in order to benefit from these account adjustments for public service loan forgiveness, as well as income-driven repayment forgiveness. All right, one other thing that we're going to talk about on this next slide is something called the public service loan forgiveness buyback. And this is something that is relatively new. And I think we're probably going to post a link in the chat with a little bit more information from the Department of Education. But essentially, it's an opportunity that was recently introduced by the Department of Education to retroactively make payments when there were months of qualifying employment, but no payments were made because the borrower was in certain deferments or forbearances. So these would be periods that aren't going to qualify or count under the account adjustment, okay? Now, who is eligible? You're eligible if you still have an outstanding balance on your loan, so a balance greater than 0, if you've been approved for qualifying employment for these same months, and if buying back these months will complete your total of 120 qualifying PSLF payments. Now, there's an application process involved. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just want to briefly outline what that looks like. So the Department of Education strongly recommends waiting until after these one-time account adjustments have been applied and are completed for all borrowers, which is slated to be by the end of this summer, 2024. So they recommend waiting until after that's been completed to see where you stand, and then looking into your options potentially under this buyback. But the process works like this. You'd need to submit a request through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness reconsideration. And you're going to include the following in your PSLF reconsideration request for buyback. Essentially, some line variation of this. I have at least 120 months of approved qualifying employment, and I'm seeking PSLF or TEPSLF discharge through PSLF buyback. Please assess my eligibility for PSLF buyback. So again, I think we're going to pop some links in the chat right here. I will also pop that language as well. I have these accessible, so I'll do this right now to make this easier for the team. Let's see here. Okay, I might not have access to the chat, but I will rely. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So let me just make sure I post this in for everyone here. Okay. All righty. Continuing right along. Now we're going to talk about getting your loans out of default. So if we can go to the next slide. Great. Okay. So a few things here. There's a new program, or relatively new program, called Fresh Start. And this is a powerful way for many borrowers to get their loans out of default a lot more easily than before. So essentially, this program streamlines the process for getting out of default. Now, there are some exceptions, and those include school-held Perkins loans or loans that went into default after March 20th of 2020. So after the payment pause or the pandemic payment pause went into effect. Now, a few benefits are applied automatically to any eligible borrowers. However, those benefits expire 1 year after the payment pause ends, unless you take some additional steps that we're going to outline on the next slide. But some of these benefits include renewed access to federal student aid, so you can take out more loans and receive more financial aid, stopped collections, eligibility for other government loans, restored ability to rehabilitate loans, and your loans become classified as current to credit reporting agencies rather than in collection, which is what it shows when you're in default. So a few more bits of detail here around this process and how to enroll. So it's going to require some action on your part if you are in default. So you can either go online to myeddebt.ed.gov, and we'll put that link in the chat, and log into your account and submit an application that way. Or you can call by phone at 1-800-621-3115. Okay. Now, a quick tip before calling, you're going to want to make sure you look up your income on your most recent federal tax return. This should be line 11 of IRS form 1040. But if you can't find it and didn't file taxes, don't worry, you should still call. But here's what to expect when you do call. It'll take about 10 minutes, and a representative will ask for some information to find your record, and then ask why you're calling. And your answer is as simple as this: fresh start to get out of default. And they'll know exactly what you're talking about. They'll initiate the process for you, and that's it. You can also apply by mail, again, by writing that PO box that you see on your screen. In your letter, you're going to want to include your name, your social security number, date of birth, and the following: I would like to use Fresh Start to bring my loans back into good standing. So those are 3 different enrollment options at your disposal if you are in Fresh Start. The process, once initiated, takes about a month to complete, and that's compared to about the 9-month rehabilitation process that was standard to getting out of default before this Fresh Start program went into existence. So this is going to be a much easier way to instantly get out of default if that is the case for you. All right, moving on to some debt relief scams. So since payments resumed back in October of last year, we have seen scams on the rise. So they typically involve offering a loan consolidation or some type of debt forgiveness in exchange for a fee. The bait and switch might include immediate loan forgiveness or deadline approaching, something that's really trying to create a sense of false urgency with you, the borrower. Some of these predatory practices include upfront fees, claiming to be the Department of Education, and promising loan forgiveness. So we just want to make sure everyone out there is aware that these exist and to just be on alert as we've seen an increase of these since payments resumed. All right, last but not least, if you are running into some issues and you'd like to submit a complaint, you can always do so through the Department of Education's Student Loan Ombudsman. And I know the Ombudsman's office works very closely with Student Debt Crisis Center. We escalate a lot of borrower cases through that office, but they can help resolve discrepancies with loan balances and payments, explain loan interest and collections charges, and identify options for resolving your issues related to consolidation, service quality, default status, bankruptcy, income tax refund offsets, and any other concerns you might have. So if you would like to share a complaint to the Ombudsman's office, you can do so at the link you see on your screen here. And again, I know we'll be putting that in the chat for any borrowers who need it. All right. At this point, I want to talk just briefly about a service called Savvy. And we have worked with Student Debt Crisis Center for almost 4 or 5 years now in providing a free tool. It's a technology service and a human service. So you are able to actually access one-on-one personalized support at absolutely no cost. This is something that is very special and provided only to the student debt crisis borrower community. But essentially, it acts as a way to help you identify the best repayment and forgiveness options for you. So you can go through, answer some questions around your family size, your income, your employment. On this next screen here, you'll see how you can actually sync your student loans with that Savvy account. This allows us to help you identify what loan types you have and if you are a candidate for consolidation. So we help to identify that for you right there. And then once you've done that on this next screen here, you'll see this is exactly what it looks like. If we can go back one more. Thank you, Sheena. It'll show you exactly what your best options are going to be as far as repayment plan. So this is a borrower who's potentially going to, best be served by the new Save plan. They'll see what that new monthly payment could be, what that total payment over time would look like, how long exactly until they'd be eligible for forgiveness, down to the month and year, and exactly how much in forgiveness they'd be eligible to receive. So they can explore all the different options available to them. And even better than that, they can actually enlist Savvy's help to help submit all of the paperwork and applications for income-driven repayment plans, as well as public service loan forgiveness. So I know our team is going to be putting a link to that Savvy page in the chat for anyone who is interested in accessing, again, this completely no-cost tool that Student Debt Crisis Center is fortunate to be able to provide to the borrower community here today on this webinar. All right, I know we are coming right up at the hour, so I think I'm going to turn it over to our team to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And we have a ton of questions. I have pulled several, so I'm just going to prioritize a few because I know we're going to go over a bit. So I will just say this right now. If we did not get to answer your question today, you can always email us at info@studentdebtcrisis.org or send us a message on our website, www.studentdebtcrisis.org. And we can drop that in the chat for you all as well. But let's get into some questions. So this person asked about the SAVE plan, but I think it applies to any program that folks apply for. So they applied for this plan when it was first announced, and they have not heard back. Should they reapply? And Spencer, I'll go ahead and toss this to you. What should folks be doing if they have not heard back after they've applied for a program?
Yeah, well, first, I'm sorry you're experiencing that. One would hope that the servicers would be able to do their jobs. We've heard different options that have worked. You are welcome to reapply. I don't think there's necessarily any harm in doing that, especially if it's been a long time. You know, if you applied like 2 weeks ago, I certainly would not recommend reapplying because that is well within the period that the application typically requires to be processed. But if we're talking many months, then it may be worth doing so. The other option I would suggest would be to contact your servicer by calling them. But as a student loan borrower myself, who's been on the phone for hours and hours and hours, I know that's easier said than done, which is why sometimes it might be easier just to submit another online application.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. Lindsay, I'll go ahead and toss this next question to you. This is about receiving forgiveness through PSLF or an IDR program. If a borrower receives forgiveness, will they have to pay taxes on that amount?
Yep. So when it comes to public service loan forgiveness, there are no federal taxes that you would have to pay. However, there may be some state taxes. So you would have to look in to see what those might look like. As far as income-driven repayment forgiveness, it is federally tax-free until or through 2025. Then after that, it is considered taxable income.
Great, thank you. Lindsay, I'll also toss this one to you, since it's about PSLF. Someone was telling me that they worked for a qualifying employer for the PSLF program, but they have now retired. Can they still apply any payments that they made while they were working for that employer towards PSLF, or should they still be currently employed by that employer?
So unfortunately, you need to still be currently employed by a qualifying employer. It doesn't have to be that same employer, but by a qualifying employer when you are receiving that forgiveness after 120. There was a brief period, a year-long period during what was called the PSLF limited waiver, where they removed that stipulation and borrowers that were retired and no longer working were able to retroactively apply and receive that forgiveness. However, that ended over a year ago. And so now, unfortunately, you do need to be employed at a qualifying employer in order to receive that.
I do just want to jump in because I think, and Lindsay, correct me, or Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, but the PSLF buyback is the answer for folks who have since retired from public service loan forgiveness. So if you're no longer working in that, but you have the 10 years of qualifying employment, you're able to use the buyback program as a way to buy back some of those months that would help you reach the 10-year mark and get your public service loan forgiveness to kick in. Is that correct, Spencer?
That's right. But that's only going to be beneficial for borrowers who have at least 120 qualifying work months since October of 2007. So you're buying back the payment, but there's really no way to quote unquote buy back the service of being in that public service job.
Got it. Well, this is why these are the experts. So I appreciate you guys. So I'm glad to provide that clarity. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you both. All right, Spencer, I'll toss this to you. This question I've heard has been coming up a lot in the chat. Do payments made during the payment pause count toward IDR or PSLF forgiveness?
Yes. With the only caveat being if you have older loans, like commercially held FFEL loans in particular, you still will need to consolidate your loans in order to be eligible generally for IDR forgiveness and PSLF. And then once that's done, those periods certainly will count. The 3+ years of the payment pause count. You did not have to make payments. Those are basically sort of free credits, if you will.
Great, thank you. This is another PSLF question. We had so many of those in the chat. This person is wondering, they owe $14,000 for federal student loans. And they are wondering if they have to make 120 payments first before they apply for public service loan forgiveness.
Oh, great. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, a great question. We get this one a lot. So, in order to receive the forgiveness, yes, you'll need to have made those 120, qualifying payments, right? But in order to sort of start your progress towards public service loan forgiveness, and I guess you could call it enroll in that program, you don't need to wait. In fact, I encourage you not to wait until you've reached that point before you submit your first PSLF form. So you can do that as early on in the process as you like. And that's actually going to ensure that the servicers are less likely to make mistakes when reviewing your repayment history and employment history. So, oftentimes borrowers will end up waiting, until after they've made it because they're finding out about the program just now. But if you know about the program early on, I encourage you to submit that PSLF form, as soon as you can, and at least get the credits you've accumulated thus far certified. Have your loans moved over to MOHELA because that is the sole servicer in charge of the public service loan forgiveness program. And then I'd recommend every 12 months going forward that you resubmit that PSLF form, basically certifying the past 12 months worth of credits so that you are getting, those 12 credits over 12 credits, inching your way closer and closer to that 120. Again, that's going to cut down on the review time process that MOHELA will need to take. Oftentimes when borrowers wait, it'll take 3, 4, 5+ months for those forms to get reviewed. And again, the chances of there being errors go up. So I encourage you to start that process as early on as you'd like.
Great, thank you. Continuing with that train of thought, Spencer, I'll toss this one to you. Folks are wondering, how do you know when your loan is forgiven? Like, what does that process look like? You've made all the payments either in an IDR plan or PSLF, and now what? What happens to your loan? Do you still have to keep making payments until they realize that your loan should be forgiven, or how does that work?
Great question. And I wish that there was an easy, clear answer. For the easiest part of this to answer would be for public service loan forgiveness. So building off what Lindsay was saying, we recommend filling out that employer certification form annually. So if you've done that over the years, you will see your official payment credit count on MOHELA inching up closer to 120. And then once you reach that 120, I believe there's a part of the ECF form that actually indicates that you are formally applying for your loans to be canceled once you're at that level. For IDR forgiveness, it's, I think, less of an application and more on the back end, once you've hit that 240 credits, payment credits, or 300, or 300, depending on your situation. As I mentioned earlier, by the end of the year, every student loan borrower will be able to see their number of payment credits on their studentaid.gov account. So it will be much more transparent and clear where you are on your journey and how close you are to forgiveness. Is there anything you would add or correct, Lindsay?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Awesome. And I just have one last question. I know we're 10 minutes over at this point, but Lindsay or Spencer, I'm not sure who wants to take this, but a lot of people are having trouble with consolidating. They have consolidated and now they're realizing maybe that wasn't the best decision for them. So is there something that folks can do to unconsolidate their loans?
No.
I'll let you take this one. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
the consolidation expert.
The short answer is no, and it's a simple one. There really is no exception. Once you've consolidated your loans, there is no going back. And in fact, that's sort of the main disclaimer that you will see when you go through the consolidation application is, it's telling you that this is once the application has been processed, it is irreversible.
Got it. Thank you, Spencer. And that is all the time that we have for questions right now. So I'll go ahead and toss it to Sabrina to close us out.
Thanks, Sabrina, Ashley. I want to say a huge thank you to our team. Thank you, Sean, Lindsay, Shayna, Sabrina, and Spencer. I really appreciate all of you. We answered a ton of questions tonight. Thank you all for joining us, for taking the time to get some more information here. As Sabrina Ashley said, if you have questions, you can email us at info@studentdebtcrisis.org. And make sure to check out the Savvy link that we specifically shared with you all tonight. Again, really appreciate all of you. We're going to have another workshop next month, so keep an eye out for that. I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening and night, and we will chat soon. Thank you all. Take care.